Welcome back. We were speaking about Dabur's numbers coming entirely in line with what the street was expecting. 21% higher sales and a 16% growth in profit. Margins maybe a little less than what the street thought. Street was expecting maybe 18.1 or thereabout. 17.6 is what they've reported. Sunil Dugal, the CEO, joins us. Mr. Dugal, thanks much for joining us. Well, first, can you take us through how much of the increase in revenues was contributed by volume and how much by realizations of value?
Well, as far as the domestic business is concerned, the composition is around 9 volume and 6 price. As far as overseas business is concerned, it's almost entirely volume. There's been very little or no price increases happening there.
Okay, a word on ASP to sales, 11.8%. Where do you see it stabilizing?
Yes. It should stabilize at around current levels or maybe a tad higher. I think we should see it around 12.5% for the full year. It's been a little muted in the second quarter compared to what we were in the first, largely on account of the festive season, which begins a little bit later. So we break advertising now in October rather than September like we normally would have done.
Okay, your margins are slightly below what the consensus was expecting. While the increasing ad spends to sales was expected, in fact yours is slightly lower. The street was expecting about 200 basis points. Done 175 on a quarter-on-quarter basis. Is it because raw materials were still a bit sticky and you expect Q3 to be slightly better?
Well, raw material was the culprit on the back of a very weak rupee, which did impact all the imports. And also pockets of very high inflation in some raw materials which we source domestically, like honey or sugar. So these two contributed to gross margin impact, which was a little bit negative compared to what we thought it would be. We still saw margin expansion at the gross level, but it was below expectations.
I have a report from a brokerage here which worries that your new products, both in the consumer care division and in the consumer health care division, require a fresh distribution setup. For instance, in consumer health care, you do need to put in place medical reps and get the doctor network in place. What are these new products and where are you in the distribution setting up?
Well, you're absolutely right. The healthcare distribution needed a major reorg, and we've completed the first part, which is the reorganization of the retail segment in terms of creating a separate distribution vertical for healthcare to cater to the urban markets. The second part is the extension of distribution in the rural markets, which is also being done. And the third leg of the whole reorganization is putting into place a team of detailing representatives who will call on doctors and sell our products and convince them to prescribe our products. So that is the third piece, which is still at a pilot stage. It should be largely completed around 6 months to 1 year from now. And I think that would really accelerate launch of new products in the OTC space, which is something which we are very interested in.
The domestic volume growth at 9%, Mr. Dugal, is largely in line with what the street is expecting. But are you seeing any signs of slowdown? I mean, this is the first time where there was talk that consumers too are facing some kind of slowdown. Are you seeing any of those signs?
Well, there could be a slowdown in case there's another round of price increases taken by the sector on the back of high inflation. Then there's a possibility it could be muted. We will try to mitigate it by distribution expansion, heightened A&P spends, etc. So we are still hopeful of a volume growth in the region of say 9 to 11%. And that's something which we will try to make happen in the next 2 quarters.
You'll have to leave it at that, Mr. Dugal, because this happens to be a day of too many results, but a more detailed check sometime later on in the month of November. Thank you very much for joining us. So that's the Dabur numbers. Good numbers in line with expectation, but this is the GAIL number, which is not at all good.